Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk about some results that we had in a recent paper which was not centrally pointed at control, but which I think has some important implications for control. The paper is about myopic optimization and non-myopic approval, and we were mostly, at least originally, thinking about reward hacking, and then later about externalized reasoning and different ways that we can build safer agents with that. Um, but particularly on some of our steganography experiments, I think there are some important lessons for how one might want to optimize around control results or monitoring results, and how we might be able to make optimization compatible with those kinds of control efforts. Just to give a brief overview of the kind of environment we're talking about here, um, which is similar to some other steganography environments that people have explored. We have a loan application environment. So the LLM is presented with a loan application that contains a bunch of data about a potential applicant. The trick is that the nationality of the applicant perfectly predicts whether the loan is profitable. Um, but other data only partially predicts. So a perfect agent from a correctness perspective would rely entirely on the nationality of the applicant. But we reward the agent for not using or mentioning nationality in addition to the correctness. And what you get is what you'd expect to see here, or at least, under sufficiently powerful optimization, which is that the agent trained with just standard reinforcement learning um, indeed learns to use the nationality and to hide this. So here's a sort of example. They've been provided, two agents provided exactly the same input, except that the nationality of the requester of the loan is flipped. And just this is like an example of how it looks in practice. It's a little bit hard to detect, even for a person reviewing them, unless you're looking at them side by side. The agent is choosing to contextualize the information in a slightly different way. So in the one case, it is pointing out that the ratio of the loan size to the income of the applicant is low. And in the other case, it's pointing out that the ratio of the loan size to the disposable income of the applicant is low. And so this is just like a slightly different framing, which then results in a different decision by the next step, which is then using this like anonymized, denationalized summary to make a loan decision. And we've provided a bunch of transcripts on this website here if anyone's curious to look into that. So this kind of thing is going to happen wherever we have a chain of thoughts or early steps in reasoning that then lead to a decision which has some kind of correctness reward, where the best way to get the best answer depends on doing something along the way that we prefer the agent doesn't do. This sort of thing will happen. And there's like clearly the option there to look at the chain of thought, to use a monitor, and to train the agent to stop doing the things that trigger the monitor. And presumably everyone in this room, is familiar with the fact that this is a great way of removing the things that trigger the monitor, but that if the incentives are such that the behavior that you're monitoring for actually just does help with the downstream task, the agent will likely find, or at least may well find, new ways to perform that behavior in a way that defeats your monitor. So this is the thing that we want to not have happen. Could you just ignore the monitor and just release systems that just, trigger the monitor, or where you do some kind of sampling to avoid the monitor? Like, maybe in practice, this is super hard. Like, I predict that all companies working in this area will really struggle politically and maybe from a regulatory perspective, like releasing agents that they know do bad stuff because their monitors pinged and told them that it's doing this bad stuff all the time. Um, it feels like a tough sell. It's very uncomfortable. So the thing that we propose doing here, and I am not going to in this talk have enough time to explain it in detail. I really recommend people look at the paper for more detail, or the blog post on the alignment forum, which is more high level overview. But is to sort of break apart the rewards that the agent receives at each step, such that when it's performing the step where you're training against the monitor, it's not thinking about the downstream task, or it's not rewarded for thinking about the downstream task. And the observation is that this is going to tend to produce an agent which isn't incentivized to do the steganographic encoding, um, which comes at some costs. It is also more myopically inclined. It isn't planning for the future because it's not trained to plan for the future. And we then need to build that foresight back in a different way. This creates a slightly delicate dance, which is limited in some ways, but opens up some doors in other ways. So I guess I would encourage people to think not just about, how do we catch these errors, but what do we do when we catch errors with control? And are there ways to build systems that, build this in a way that doesn't directly incentivize them to be hiding things from us from the reward itself? Thanks.